Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Liz Seckel, the grant writer for the Division of Maternal Fetal Medicine in the OBGYN department here at Stanford. First, we'll spend a few minutes going over the grant review process. Then we'll dive into the actual writing piece. There are two things you can do with words: choose them and arrange them. We'll start with word choice, then go over arranging them in increasingly larger units of thought, sentences, and then paragraphs. I want you to get as much out of this as possible, so we're going to work through a lot of exercises. Finding the time to write a grant is bad enough. Why should we care about making the reviewers' jobs easier? They're often busy academics, just like yourself, trying to find pockets of time to review a giant stack of proposals. Help them help you by making your proposal as easy for them to understand as possible. The easier it is for them to pull out the important concepts, the easier it is for them to advocate on your behalf. Let's watch an NIH mock study section to see what it's like for them.
Once the peer review committee has been recruited, your application will be assigned at least 3 reviewers. Before the meeting, these reviewers will read your application in detail with an eye toward NIH's core criteria, assigning scores for each and providing preliminary overall impact scores of 1 through 9. Reviewers will also consider issues such as the safety and appropriateness of research involving human subjects and vertebrate animals. The 3 reviewers will also write critiques covering the review criteria, so when the peer review panel convenes, they're ready to discuss each application in detail.
And I'm John Bowers. I'm your scientific review officer for the day. I'm going to go through...
The peer review meeting begins with a statement by the SRO, stressing the confidentiality of the review and the integrity of the review process, and discussing other important issues.
Okay, let me call us all to order. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Grant applications at CSR are reviewed in order of their preliminary scores to help ensure that scores are well calibrated. Reviewers begin with the best scored application.
All right, so we'll start with the first application, and just a reminder, this is from a new investigator, so our special considerations for NIH for new investigators apply here. This is from Dr. Fred Nikoros from Stanford University, defining nickel accumulation in Cronstedt's disease. The reviewers are David Granger, Brian Hoffman, and Martin Filbert, and we'll start by just going around to the 3 of you and getting your preliminary impact scores.
I was less than enthusiastic with a score of 5.
5? Okay, great. Brian?
I was very enthusiastic and came out with a score of 2.
Okay. Martin Filbert?
2.
2. 5, 2, 2. David, just give us a quick summary of the substance of the proposal and then your review comments.
Yeah, this proposal uses high-density micro and nano-electrode arrays from a talented analytical chemist to determine the distribution of nickel. On this particular application, I was assigned to be the primary reviewer. That reviewer's job is generally to introduce the application to the group, to provide a brief synopsis of the high points and some low points, to underscore the impact of the application, and then to proceed through the criteria for review which have been stipulated by the reviewing process. The weaknesses, though, in innovation is that the electrode array methods have been applied to tissues by other groups with success, and there are limitations that are recognized in the methodology, and the experience of the other groups and their limitations is not documented by the PI. In terms of the environment, the strengths of the environment is that it's very well suited. The PI is well instrumented, and the resources and the environment and its collaborations are in fact very appropriate. The weaknesses of the environment is that the available equipment for preparing samples and running Perk hole gradients particularly is not evident. Access to fluorescence microscopy is detailed but not adequately described. I found that the overall impact strength was in defining then the intercellular distribution of the accumulated nickel in conditions of nickel overload and in the direct approach to the successful elucidation of these towards a new therapy. So overall, a balanced enthusiasm with the new investigator I found very nice for this particular PI, but I found numerous technical concerns.
Thanks, David. So Brian, if we can move to any of your views that are complementary or contrasting.
I think I probably underweighted some of the flaws, didn't pick up on them or didn't weight them properly because I was so really enamored with these strengths. And I appreciate his reservations, but I come from a different direction because I was so taken with the methodology. Mm-hmm.
After my review, then the secondary reviewer, Dr. Hoffman, tempered some of the negative points that I had brought up and proposed an alternative view and proposed some other strengths which I didn't see in the initial read and the initial review.
Dr. Hoffman raised the points about the broad significance of this work that I think really began to turn the minds of the committee.
I agree with Brian's assessment. This is a highly innovative proposal from a junior investigator. It uses novel technologies that I think are going to provide great answers. Moreover, I think the innovation is heightened by the fact that virtually nothing is known about Cronstedt's disease.
Great, thank you. So let's move then to a general discussion, and here we're really looking for your comments on aspects of the application that you think will really drive our consideration of the score. So, Gail?
Yeah, I had a question just because it is a new investigator, it's a complex system, and a as yet relatively uncharacterized disease. What do you think the new investigator skills in terms of troubleshooting or at least having access to collaborators that may help in that respect?
You're right, it is a new investigator, but nonetheless, in this application, he surrounded himself with general competence to, I think, allay my problems with any confidence in his ability to go to his collaborative team and to adjust his bandwidth within his expertise and go to his collaborators where it's appropriate.
What he hasn't brought to the table in his electrochemistry, I think he'll gain and gather from his collaborators, and so it makes a good team and a good match.
Any other comments? Maybe I can go back to the first reviewers and see how you now consider your scores in view of the comments around the table, the nature of the discussion. David?
So I think I'm a bit too harsh with my 5, and I would be willing to reduce my score and increase my enthusiasm based on what I've heard from my collaborators and my friends here at the table. I guess I'll go to a 3.
Okay, so thank you. And Brian?
I'm no less enthusiastic about the methodology, but the framework in which it's embedded, the experimental framework that David's pointed out weaknesses of, I mean, I have to come up a little bit, and I'll meet him at 3.
Thanks, Brian. So 2 3s. And Martin?
Yeah, I'm really sold on the innovation here and on the promise. So I'm going to stay at 2, especially since our comments are going to be communicated to this investigator.
Okay, so thank you. So strong enthusiasm for a new investigator, some reservations about the methodology and how well it will apply to the disease model. So 2, a 3, and a 3. Terrific. Okay, so let's record our final scores.
At the end of each review, the rest of the panel confidentially scores the application.
The discussion really worked what it was supposed to do, which was that the group evolved in its thinking and reached a place where I think they felt quite positive overall about the application, strongly positive about the investigator, and felt that he would find his way.
Any thoughts from watching the video? Conversation is largely steered by the 3 primary reviewers. Others may not have read the application until the meeting and skim it during the study section. Making things easy for the reviewer to locate can be really important when time is of the essence. The study sections only give 15 minutes per grant, and they do 4 an hour. It can get really exhausting. Again, it's in your best interest to make their jobs as easy as possible. Here's some more tips directly from the NIH.
In NIH grant applications, perhaps the most common, especially among new investigators, is overambitiousness, just kind of spreading out and trying to cover too much territory.
If you do not convey the essence of the idea clearly, then no matter how good the idea is, it's lost. And so what we term as grantsmanship frequently on the panel is really the idea of efficiently and sometimes repetitively conveying what you want to do, what you will do, and how it will advance the science.
I would encourage any applicant to seek outside review before submitting the application. There are things you miss all the time. And you should take their advice seriously, take their critiques as important, and work on revisions before you actually make your grant application and submit it.
Well, the role of program directors, such as myself, is to advise applicants and to be advocates for them. An important part of the responsibility of a program director is to keep abreast of the particular field and research area that they're overseeing. And this can be an advantage to the applicants because they see it from a broader perspective.
I don't know anyone who gets positive results on every single grant application they submit. And the first one that gets rejected is the hardest, but they're never fun. And after that, you regroup and you just move on.
In fact, you will always receive a summary statement which contains the criticisms that were leveled at the grant by the study section members. It's very important to read these criticisms carefully and to take them into account and correct the application when you resubmit the grant.
You can read so many proposals, and yet one will stick out and hit you in the face as being an absolutely wonderful piece of literature. And for me, these contain, again, a lucid style, a very compelling creative scientific idea, and this idea of impact, of moving science in a mode towards a clinical end that is not only credible, but you think will make an enormous boost of capability or boost of therapeutic value to a patient population that currently is in some type of need.
You have a bunch of people looking at your proposal who are disposed to do well by you, who want to find an exciting idea and good science and support it and tell them a good story. Tell them a story about what you want to do, why you want to do it, and how you're going to do it.
There are essentially three elements of a proposal that get me really excited. The major hook, frankly, is the way it's presented. How clear is the language? How well do the ideas follow one from another? The second, and perhaps more important, is what is the quality of the idea? The third is the innovation. How much will this one study advance our knowledge of something that has eluded our consciousness for some time?
I would encourage any applicant to take part in reviewing activities such as they exist, perhaps reviewing manuscripts for journal, review an abstract for your professional meetings, and when invited to review for NIH, participate. You'll find that your applications get stronger and you learn a lot by reviewing and participating.
The best advice I could give to an applicant who's starting to write a proposal for the first time is to do your homework with respect to what NIH is looking for in a grant proposal. Get advice from your peers and mentors on what sort of proposal you should write and how you should write it. There's lots of information on the NIH website that will help you. There are many opportunities for funding.
If you're not eligible to grade grants for the NIH yet, I think you need to be junior faculty or above. I try to review some internal grants at Stanford or do peer review through the Grant Writing Academy. As the video said, having your colleagues evaluate your application can make a big difference. They have the capacity to pick up the same scientific and technical errors that would otherwise be caught by the official reviewers. Much better to hear it before and have time to fix it. Once you have a draft, show your draft application to your collaborators, as well as a colleague that does not know what you intend to do. After reading your proposal, they should be able to tell you what you intend to do, why it's important to do, and how you're going to do it. If they can't tell you these things, you must significantly revise your proposal. Ideally, you should allow them 2 weeks to evaluate your draft, after which you should give yourself at least a week to respond to their criticisms. I understand we don't often live in an ideal world when it comes to time, but even if you are following a compressed schedule, shorten the time frame for this step, don't skip it. While they're reviewing your specific aims or your research plan, focus on other parts. You don't need to get stuck waiting. The bigger grants like those for the NIH can be beastly, and there are a lot of obnoxious little documents to do. Another thing I do is grade all my big grants. I'll print out the draft and the scoring rubric, put on my cranky reviewer hat, and write down section by section what I'd want to see in order to give it a higher score. Then I go in and make those changes when possible. An NIH scoring rubric and the instructions for reviewers is one of your handouts. You can try using this strategy on the next grant you write.